Well, that leads me on to Alex Scott, who I really wanted to sort of nail down because I know a lot of Manchester United fans like the idea of him. Premier League proven, is going to come in, what you would expect, quite a hefty price tag if Manchester United managed to get that deal over the line. Some would consider him marquee, some wouldn't. But with Alex Scott, has there been any fresh talks with him, and is there any advancements whatsoever? Because it does seem like he went quite high up Manchester United's list, and I was wondering if Youri Tielemans would have sort of put a stop to that pursuit, but is the pursuit still there, and has there been any more advancement from United's side or any other clubs as well?
Yeah, it's not necessarily put a stop to it. Manchester United, Manchester City, Arsenal already made their approaches to Bournemouth and were told not for sale, and nothing could develop with Scott now until Scott and Bournemouth speak further, because if Scott makes it clear that he's not going to sign a new deal, maybe it opens the door up. But until they've had that conversation, and my information is it will be late this week or early next week, nobody will know where they stand or if Bournemouth's stance is going to change. So Bournemouth value Scott at 80 million. I don't think Manchester United were ever going to go that high. And Bournemouth sources as of now were saying if he signs a new deal, great, release clause 2027. If he doesn't sign a new deal, then we're happy to let another year come off the contract, even though the value of the player will depreciate. Some of that can be grandstanding in games because, of course, Bournemouth are going to take that position until the player's communicated what he wants to do. But it's quiet and a stalemate for all clubs interested in Alex Scott because it has to play out a little bit further between Bournemouth and Scott first. But Man United already made that inquiry. They tried to be decisive. And yes, Scott is still a player on Manchester United's radar, even after Youri Tielemans. But let's see whether he becomes available this window, because Bournemouth have got a habit of persuading players to stay that extra year because they know that eventually the club will not unduly stand in their way. And from experience of dealing with Alex Scott, maybe famous last words, but he doesn't strike me as the kind of player that's going to force his way out of Bournemouth.
Does he still fit the bill of that profile of a defensive player that Manchester United want?
Well, not necessarily, because when you look at the chemistry now, they'll be looking for somebody that's maybe a little bit more disciplined, but certain players like Scott can be moulded and shaped. So you look at Lucas Bergvall, for example, it's a good kind of case study. Tottenham fans would not see him as like for Elliot Anderson, and yet Nottingham Forest do, because they've got a slightly different plan. And he's certainly versatile enough to fulfill a role that complements Kobbie Mainoo. And because they are almost certainly going to add 3 midfielders plus Kobbie Mainoo, you've got the different dynamics at play. So maybe Scott's not a fit in one partnership, but is in another. And that's kind of why he's still on their radar, but not, as I say, at least according to my information, as high as 80 million. So if, as some reports have suggested, Scott became available on the market at 60, then maybe it's a different story. But at the moment, when I speak to Bournemouth sources, they're clear that it's 80 million or nothing. And that's probably why we haven't had any progress yet.
And then with Manu Kone, I know a lot of United fans really like the idea of him. I mean, we've heard reports that he's very open to the move. I just wanted clarification. Is this something Manchester United would actually want to advance on? How far along is it? I know there's probably other clubs interested as well. Is there any idea of who them clubs are and how quick this deal would have to be done? And there's some suspicions that it could be agent-led as Kone wants a move. I mean, could you just clarify the Kone situation for us?
Yeah, the Kone situation is that they've made an inquiry on the player side and they like him, but he's one of several options. So let's see whether anything develops in the course of the next few days or weeks. These inquiries are more normal than perhaps people realise. I think that he's proven valuable for his country as well. And that's partially why there's a lot of interest about making the move now and trying to capitalise on the fact that there's a fair few clubs currently tracking the player. There's other interest from the Premier League, that's for sure. There was a bid from Al Ahly in the January window to try and sign the player, and he wasn't that interested in going to Saudi Arabia. There had been some calls from Atletico Madrid, but they've moved on to other options. And that's kind of where we stand at the moment. Yes, the player would be open to a move, but we have to wait and see whether anything advances in a club-to-club sense, because we're not there yet. We're in a call-around phase, if you like. I understand that Man United fans will just want to know who's next and why can't it happen tomorrow. But there's an element of they've got two, they're really pleased with those two, And now how do you bring those two in, integrate them, work out the chemistry as players return for pre-season and from the World Cup, and then understand exactly what you need, as opposed to rushing every single deal. It's exciting for fans, but there's an element of just putting the brake on to make sure that the final midfielder is the right midfielder. And this is why Manchester United have been quite careful in the last few days to discuss what direction they may go in. But once they have that target in mind, don't again be surprised if they move really quickly, because once they've established we're definitely going for this player, as they've proven in the last two signings with both Santos and Tielemans, they're able to get them quickly. Tielemans was a little bit more like Cunha in the sense there was just a low-hanging release clause there that they could trigger. But Santos, there was no messing around. There was no delaying with Chelsea, who can be tough negotiators. They came to an agreement there very quickly. And this is a reflection of Manchester United when they are going to move in the market to try and go under the radar and get deals done as quickly as possible. But quickly as possible isn't only about a recruitment team, especially when you're adding a third player in the centre of the park. It's also about speaking to Michael Carrick, who may say, wait a minute, I want to try some things on the training ground first before I determine who I think the best third signing is, because that chemistry is as important as those making the decisions on paper when they're looking at these recruitment profiles.